On a freezing winter afternoon, a lonely man saw two wolves walking silently along the edge of his. Rather than baring their fangs or growling, these majestic but terrifying creatures seemed to, desperately kicking her door as if begging in shelter when. Finally opened the door, he could not foresee the moment that awaited him and that it would change his life, what they wanted. Exactly these frozen wolves. And why would they choose the warm home of a human over the nature that? Call home Warren Pierce was no stranger to harsh winters, having lived. All his life, in the remote Alaskan countryside, he was very familiar with freezing temperatures and winds. Howlers, his sturdy weathered wooden cabin bore witness to years of diaclac. Survival in one of the world's most unforgiving climates yet. In spite of his hard irons, nothing could have prepared him for the vision that would have made him. Received an afternoon. Nevada had been a normal day, or as normal as it can be. In the dead of winter, Warren had cut enough wood to get through the night and torv. He had checked his small vegetable greenhouse that was kept alive with a moonim. Only heater at dusk, retired to the interior, happy to pass the carrier. Happy to pass the boonim. Long dark hours by its crackling fireplace with a cup of hot tea. Then a stranger was heard. Scratch at the front door, accompanied by soft moans that broke the silence of the night at the Duchess. At first, Warren assumed that it was a stray dog, perhaps one of the few canes, savages who wandered the outskirts of the city, but when he looked out the icy window, his heart began to beat hard. There on his porch were two wolves, emaciated their pelts of yesteryear. Proudly they were tangled and covered in snow, and their breath was visible in the frigid air instead of grunting or acting aggressively, shivered with cold and exhaustion, one of the Seta. They even let out a faint howl as if calling for help from the instincts of Garas. Warren fought against his caution. Wolves were predators after all. But these animals didn't look threatening, they looked like. Desperate against his better judgment, Warren grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door to the wolf. He took a trembling step forward. His bright eyes were not filled with hostility, but with a scowl. Pleading intensity at that moment, any fear I felt was eclipsed by a surge of compassion that had led these creatures to seek refuge from a human, and if the kai bis, let in perhaps his act of kindness would invite danger to his home like this. An extraordinary encounter between a lone man and two wild wolves began, an encounter that would test Warren's determination, would challenge his preconceived notions of nature, and lead him to a twamwa, result that no one could have predicted. Warren stood on the threshold of his cabin with his heart pounding at the charada. Watching the two wolves, the snow was rolling around him, accumulating in little piles by his front door. The temperature had plummeted well below zero, and to see the animals trembling under their fur, their wide luminous eyes. Naz seemed to beg for warmth and safety was a fascinating and unsettling sight to the Bizir. Wild predators begging for refuge, still clinging to the knob of the Bizir. Warren doubted common sense, dictated that inviting Los Lobos to his. It was a terrible idea. They were wild, unpredictable, and potentially. However, the more I looked at their tormented expressions, the more convinced I was that, who did not pose an immediate threat. Their trembling bodies and their tired attitude spoke of desperation, not aggression. With a measured inhalation, made a decision. Wincing in pain against the wind, he opened the door wider and gestured for the Makkah. Wolves looked at each other, if you can call it that, before advancing cautiously, leaving faint footprints on the Bauchstlow. Blizzard, the moment his fur came into contact with the heat of the hut, it seemed like a shiver, as if they were finally releasing the tension they had carried for miles in the tanki. Cold elegantly, the couple crossed the threshold and stopped just inside the Toyan living room. Warren, moving slowly so as not to scare them, closed the door, isolating him from the howling of the wind. He prayed silently that his instincts would not fail him. The wolves stood still for a moment, their breaths. They sounded loud in the sudden silence of the cabin. Then Tatu. Hepra began to explore. With careful curiosity, with his nose on the floor, sniffing the furniture and the revocape. Small pile of firewood near the fireplace. Warren stood nearby, silently, watching a wolf a little, smaller with a patch of gray hair on his back, limped slightly. Leaning on the right hind leg, his rib cage was visible under the fur, which indicated a long period of starvation, the other wolf a little larger. He had a scar that ran down his snout. Despite his state of wasting, they showed a dignity. Calmly moving without haste or panic, Warren couldn't help but feel a bisapa. A twinge of amazement at her raw beauty, she approached the fireplace and threw in another log. To increase the heat, the crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the pies. The walls and the cabin were filled with a warm glow. The wolves led. His attention to the fire, and one of them let out a soft groan as he approached. Perhaps it was the first time they had approached such a heat source, as the room became more and more beautiful. Warren realized he had to tackle the obvious next step, food scavenging, pantry, and took out some meat that he had planned to cook for himself. He asked if it was prudent to feed the wolves with raw cuttings, but given his condition, he did not see many options. He left a plate of meat on the floor in the living room, and the wolf walked back. The smaller wolf approached first, sniffing cautiously. Before taking a hesitant bite, the larger wolf joined in. He and together devoured the food in a matter of seconds with eyes that reflected gratitude and relief. Warren felt a pang of compassion. How long it had been since they ate life. The wild was brutal, and the intense cold made it almost impossible to house animals, weak or injured, once fed. The wolves seemed to relax even more their prey. Tense posture softened Warren, who continued to maintain a respectful distance, settled into his mouse. Ma's chair near the fireplace was well aware of the risk I was taking, but something about the behavior. Salvo Los Lobos reassured him they were exhausted, possibly on the verge of convalescence, and had reached a point where pride and caution gave way to survival instincts. The fact that they allowed him to get so close said a lot about his desperation and his confidence. Warren was looking after the fire by leafing through an old novel that had been read countless times while Los Lobos slept restless, getting up from BS. Occasionally the head before a gust of wind outside, or the slight crackle of the fireplace at a moment. Given the larger wolf whimpered softly in his sleep by moving his paws as if. Warren felt an unexpected impulse to calm him down, but he abstained, respecting the boundary between them. The night progressed, and finally Warren prepared a makeshift resting area near the warmest corner of the cabin. Lured Los Lobos there by offering them blankets and extra wood on the fire, but with some. Cautiously curled up with his muzzle tucked under his tail as he watched them, Warren realized that he should probably get some rest for the day, too. It had been anything but normal, and the tiredness was noticeable before he went to sleep. Checked twice the locks of his doors and windows. An old man, habit in bear country, now seemed doubly important since had two wolves inside. When turning off the lights, he found himself praying for a spukta. Pray at night, free of conflict, couldn't help but remember stories of Cordon Sen, the wolf attacks, but his instinct told him that these creatures were not there to hurt him. The first signs of dawn came earlier than expected. Warren woke up with the soft glow of dawn filtering through the icy windows. Checked the middle living room, waiting for chaos or some sign of aggression, but place found a scene. Calm. The wolves were awake, but calm, watching him with expressions that I could only describe as tired gratitude. Stoked the fire and noticed that the catch of the smaller wolf seemed worse this morning, perhaps. Where he swag tried harder during the night. Worried, Warren decided to see if he would be allowed him to get closer by moving slowly. Knelt down and extended the scene. The wolf looked at him but stood still, as if he felt he had no bad intentions. Carefully, Warren put his hand on the wolf's hind paw, shuddered, emitting a soft growl of pain, but did not attack. Detected swelling, perhaps an old injury or frostbite. Medical treatment would be risky, but I couldn't sit idly by. I'll do what I can, he muttered, like if the wolf could understand him. Standing up, he took out a first aid kit from. Mentally thankful for his years in the Boy Scouts, he had no veterinary experience, but at least I could clean and bandage the wound on the curé. The real challenge would be whether the wolf trusted him enough to allow him to watch from the corner. The largest wolf tensed up, his amber eyes fixed on every movement of the wolf. Warren sensing the delicate balance of trust, Warren proceeded with the style. Utmost caution, knelt beside the smaller wolf that lay trembling over the blankets and muttered reassuring words if the wolf would allow it. I could help you, otherwise I'd have to back off a wrong move. Could unleash the primal instincts that still lurk. Under their fragile truce, the smaller wolf looked at Warren. With a mixture of apprehension and pain, his trembling body spoke, as if he wasn't sure whether to trust this. Crouched before him, Warren gently patted the blankets with his. Hoped to convince the wolf to stay still. For his relief, he issued a low whimper, and he rested his head on his paws. The largest wolf remained close up, observing the scene carefully, ready to intervene at the slightest sign. Warren opened his rudimentary first aid kit. One messy collection of antiseptic bandages and gauze. Had not used it A lot in the past, apart from treating the occasional scratch or blister from chopping wood, this was a situation. Completely different. He moved slowly, speaking in soft tones, aware that the smaller wolf. He could lash out if he got scared. "Calm down, friend," he murmured, placing a towel. Bent under the wolf's wounded hind leg while smearing antiseptic on. A cotton swab, the wolf let out a slight growl but did not move away. The wound was not deep, but was inflamed, possibly from a previous injury that had been aggravated by the cold and constant movement of the babjura. Warren's heart tightened at the thought of how much suffering she had endured. Creature in the wild winter landscape, the largest wolf walked a few meters away, emitting a slight growl of concern. Warren looked at him and nodded quickly. "I'm doing everything I can," he said, as if the wolf could really understand him. He knew it was a risk to speak in. Loud voice and attract attention, but I hoped his calm tone would keep the tension at bay after. Cleaning the wound and applying a light bandage, Warren carefully examined the wolf's paw pads. Observing cracks and signs of frostbite, he used a soft ointment to soothe the chews. Raw skin before gently wrapping the paw with gauze for. The whole process, the wolf shuddered and whimpered, but surprisingly remained. Once it was over, Warren breathed a breath that hadn't been given. The account she was holding is already whispering, slowly withdrawing her hands. The wolf exhaled through his nose, the sound almost like a sigh of relief. Warren. He cracked a small smile, a surge of empathy rising within him once. With immediate medical needs addressed, Warren turned his attention to the basic issue of the bid. He checked his pantry to see what was left of the food he had given to Los Lobos before. Sufficient provisions to feed them again, but their stocks were limited. If these wolves intended to stay longer than a day or two, he would need a plan too. Getting more resources, something that wasn't easy during the harsh Alaskan winter. He decided to go out briefly to collect more firewood and check out possible hunting opportunities nearby. Taking his coat and gloves, Warren stopped at the door, looking back at the wolves. They watched him, but didn't. They made no move to follow him. "I'll be back soon," he said softly, as if to reassuring them and himself. As he left, Warren encountered a landscape. Implants of an immaculate white. The sky was still cloudy, and the wind blew through the pollen. Layers of clothing he trudged through the knee-deep snow to. The pile of firewood near the edge of his property, filling a sled with logs. From time to time they scanned the mid-horizon, hoping to see more wolves or any sign of threatening fauna. Mind was filled with questions. Had these two been part of a larger herd or pariahs? And what would happen if his herd came to get them once the sleigh was loaded? Warren took a moment to observe the silent one. The land was beautiful, but it also felt eerily relentless. He surprised himself, imagining the smaller wolf limping through these accumulations of snow, wind, and wounded. Pushed to the brink of despair, thought reaffirmed its decision to. No creature should have to endure such suffering alone. Returning to the cabin, Warren found the wolves lying near the fireplace. The smaller one seemed to be in a better mood, licking his bandaged paw from time to time. The biggest wolf ever. Guard raised his head to see him cross the threshold. Warren loaded the wood by the fireplace and fanned the flames, sighing with relief when the heat. He spreads through his numb fingers, unwraps a portion of his remaining flesh and places it on a plate, rakura plate, and puts it on the ground. The wolves approach, cautiously grateful for the badawa. Food, but aware of Warren's presence. While eating, he thinks about what? Surreal, that's the situation of two wild wolves devouring their provisions. In the comfort of your living room, however, you don't feel fear, just a bond. Forged through mutual survival. Hours later, the pakpaka isn't. The cabin had fallen into a quiet rhythm. Warren dozed in his armchair by the fire. The flickering light shone. Dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Los Lobos rested on the bon, blankets that he had arranged for them by getting up only to lick the water of the kamsham. A bowl he had placed nearby. Occurred to him that he should contact someone, maybe a ranger or a wildlife specialist, but a part of him feared that. In doing so, they will take Los Lobos, or even worse, they will sacrifice them if they viera. Considered a conflicting threat, decided to wait one more day to see if Tefanor. They were regaining strength and perhaps returning to nature on their own. Felt a kalka bopper gokon. Apothecaris, pang of guilt at the thought of wanting to keep them longer. Their presence, though unusual, gave him a sense of dollars. Night fell again, and the wind howled inside the barragan cabin. The glow of the home was still a firm beacon against the darkness. Warren, uneasy about events of the day, he found himself walking The wolves watched him with a calm and bias. It was as if they recognized their confusion and finally dropped into the game. Kajer, feeling the responsibility on his shoulders, what would the Trasen? Tomorrow, Los Lobos would leave, returning to the life that nature had given them. Destined, or they would stay forging an even deeper connection with this. The human who had opened his heart and his home, Warren, couldn't be sure of everything. What he knew was that the next few days would test his compassion, his wits, and possibly his limits. The Mahati. Dawn opened with a fragile light casting a pale glow on the snow-covered earth that was. Extended beyond Warren's cottage and Elliot, the warmth of the hearth enveloped. Warren and his two unexpected guests woke up. Warren noticed something peculiar. The largest wolf was no longer by the fire. A slight sense of alarm was. Seized, it would have escaped into the night, could have ventured again. In the frigid desert, his worry was quickly cleared by a growl that came from the far corner of the living room there, protecting the cheddar. The smallest and most injured wolf was the largest, with flattened ears and bristly hair, yet he did not look at him. Bird Warren's heart raced at the door, which had frightened the purger. Wolf rising cautiously and headed for the window outside in the gloom. In the morning he saw a movement. Something lurked just beyond the edge of his property near the tree line. Its breath fogged the cold glass. As he looked more closely at first, he thought it might be another animal, a moose or a bear. A human silhouette emerged from behind. A thick pine tree. Adrenaline ran through. Warren didn't usually have visitors, especially during the harshest part of winter. He took his coat and a flashlight and pressed his ear to the door, attentive to any sound. The largest wolf kept growling, as if reinforcing the warning that someone was there. Outside, the smaller wolf was struggling to get up, whimpering softly. "Number." "It's okay," Warren whispered, hoping to reassure them both and himself. He opened the door just a little, and a gust of cold air entered outside. The figure had disappeared from sight, but the tracks in the snow led around the cabin. Warren came out with his nerves on edge. The wind. He pinched his face and tucked his gloved hands under his arms, scrutinizing. The line of trees caught a glimpse of movement again near the pile of firewood. This time curiosity met caution. Whoever was there, loitering, could be in trouble or could pose a threat by arming yourself with tsayane. Courage. Warren raised his voice. "Hello, if you need help, say something, the only one." The howl of the wind took a few hesitant steps forward, leaving traces that are superimposing them or planning to harm them. As he did not get a response, he decided to go around the hut to check for damage or signs of forced entry. Snow crunching under his feet, and Rigav. All the sounds are amplified in the fresh air. The road took it further. Bikerpros of the woodpile, where he noticed recent indentations in the bark of a nearby tree when he bent down to inspect it. A sudden voice spun it around inside, asked a voice of. A short and urgent woman was wrapped in a heavy Grim Reaper with her face partially hidden by a hood and a scarf were only her eyes. Intense and worried ones that blinked towards the door of the Warren cabin. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to keep a calm tone. Despite the jolt of surprise, his gaze narrowed. "I'm hunting those wolves," he said, as if it were obvious they belonged to a pack. Nearby disappeared, and I've been tracking them for days. The statement surprised Warren. Marrying took hold of him. Did this woman intend to harm them, or proc time? It could be a ranger or a researcher. Exhaled, forming a bitterate little cloud with the breath. It's not that he clarified, as if reading his expression. "I'm trying to help them. This I am. With a wildlife rehabilitation group we have been monitoring. This pack for a while, especially these two," his voice softened with concern. "The youngest has been injured and separated from the group. Number, they will survive here alone." Warren felt a great relief, but suspicion persisted. Why haven't they come to my door? Instead of hanging around here, the woman looked away, embarrassed she wasn't sure of what I contradicted. I had to confirm that they were here. People can be unpredictable when it comes to. Warren couldn't rebut that. He came in and pointed to the cabin. "But move slowly. They're scary, and I don't want them to feel threatened by the Prendi." Warren prepared for a possible conflict on Dra. Bigger wolf sensing newcomer barked warning by placing himself between the woman and her wounded companion. The woman carefully removed her hood and scarf, revealing tired features. But determined, he bent down, extending his hands with Las Palmas up in Peace's sign. "Hello," Big Man muttered. "It's okay, I'm a friend," his tone. Reassuring, reminiscent of that of a veterinarian or an experienced animal keeper, gradually approached. Slowly, without taking his eyes off the warren, he watched in amazement as the warmint creature, after hesitating a little, let her approach. "By the way, it's called," Face said, the woman over her shoulder perceiving Warren's attentive curiosity. "I am a field researcher at the Lidzina, Northridge Wildlife Center." Calm-faced demeanor appeared. The wolves examined the bandaged leg of the youngest, nodding with approval of Warren's efforts. "You've done a good job cleaning this up," he said admiringly in the voice. "You could have saved his life." Warren exhaled the care that he had been holding back alone. "He was trying to help," he said in a voice. Baja Kara explained that the pack from which these wolves came had been, and to study Beklan, due to the decrease in their numbers in the region, the smallest wolf revealed that it was a young female who had probably been injured by a trap or turf fight on. The biggest wolf was a close brother, practically his only family, the couple. He had disappeared during a blizzard, and the research team feared the worst, until Kara found his footprints. As he spoke, the wolves visibly relaxed, their posture softened as if they recognized his smell or his voice. Warren felt a surge of relief and also a twinge of sadness, realized that her time with him might be coming to an end. By the time professional care, numerology Philly, needed to return to the Temi. Chinol, nature, that was where they belonged. "You're going to take them to your center?" he asked. Warren quietly nodded. "We have an enclosure where we can treat his paw properly. Once it is healed, we will release them back into his territory." He paused, looking at him with friendliness, "Of course, only if you think it is good or on your property." After all, Warren looked at the wolves. A strange pain twisted in his chest. He'd grown unexpectedly attached in such a short time, but he knew what he had to do is the best thing for them, right? "It is," Kara confirmed softly. "They're wild creatures, they'll thrive once. That they are healthy and can reunite with their herd." At that time felt that the weight whole me of compassion and responsibility clashed, wanted to keep them safe. Bajo. Their roof to forever protect them from harsh realities. Beyond the walls, milas, of his cabin, however, he understood that true freedom, the true survival, meant returning to the land they knew standing offered to. Face a tense smile. "So let's do what we have to do," he said. "I'll help everything." Whatever the presence of Kara may have caused a sudden change in the dynamics of Warren's cabin for the Kaas wolves, she was a familiar figure, someone whose smell and behavior they recognized as safe, though not from the cause. All reliable for Warren, she was an unexpected solution to a dilemma: how to provide animals with the care they needed without compromising their wild nature. After Kara left her equipment in a corner of the cabin and approached the smaller wolf and examined the Woton. Bandaged paw with an experienced touch, frowning at signs of swelling. "Not infected," he said, looking at Warren, "but will need proper treatment in Arcan facilities." "You did well with what you had." Warren felt a mixture of relief and pride. He observed the delicacy with which Kara interacted with Lhasa. Wolves to speak to them in a reassuring tone and with a non-threatening posture, the largest wolf in the herders. He watched attentively, occasionally letting out a low moan as if expressing concern for his companion. "This must be his brother," said Face, nodding to the attentive guardian, Los Lobos. "They form strong family bonds. If she is hurt, he will not leave her side." Warina felt thoughtful. In recent days he had witnessed that link. Firsthand, the larger wolf had constantly protected the smaller one, sharing its scant warmth. During those cold, stormy nights, as night approached, Warren proposed that it be to stay in the cabin one more night before trying to transport Los Lobos. Kara agreed, pointing out the need to keep the animals' stress as low as possible, suggested that they gradually acclimate them to be in Botin, in a carrier or in a vehicle if they could get one nearby. "I have a ton in Nanimai. Snowmobile," offered Warren, "could help us get to your bride, equipment, or transport them part of the way if roads are impassable." Face's face lit up with gratitude. "That would be perfect. My truck is parked a few miles away, but the snow is too deep to drive here safely." They spent the next hour discussing the logistics. The plan was for Kara to be Radio with their colleagues at dawn, they would prepare a safe enclosure at the Wildlife Center, and Warren would help transport the wolves through. The snowy terrain seemed simple, but Warren knew that nature rarely cooperated with human plans. When the sun plunged below the horizon, the cabin took on a soft glow thanks to the fire. The two wolves now more, resting peacefully, side by side with slow breathing and constant face watched them with a tender gaze. I have tracked them for a long time. Months, he said quietly. They used to run with a herd of about 6, but then we lost his signals during a blizzard, and I feared the worst. Warren stirred the embers of the fireplace, feeling a pang of empathy must have. Separated in some way, it's a miracle that they found me or that I found them. Face nodded. Wolves are very sociable to be isolated from. The herd can be a death sentence, especially for an injured member. It's amazing that they survived so long. Their conversation drifted towards her lighter themes, her life as a researcher, Warren's quiet existence in the remote cabin, the challenges. The herd of living in such unforgiving conditions outside the wind had subsided, leaving a stillness that it was both peaceful and creepy from time to time. The wolves would move or let out a soft. He sighed, reminding Warren of his presence and the delicate trust he had been offered before going to sleep. Warren returned to preparing food for the wolves with a cautious but intrigued face. He looked at his method. He was impressed by how calm the animals around him seemed to be. You've done something. Incredible, said admiringly on the voice. Most wolves would be too terrified or aggressive to enter the house of a human like that, but they clearly perceive your goodwill. Warren blushed, slightly unaccustomed to such praise. He couldn't. Leaving them there freezing, he muttered they were desperate. And I guess. That I too, repeated face with curiosity. In his eyes, Warren hesitated, and Hiosai. Then he gave a half-smile. Living here alone can be hard, maybe in Apolloki. In a strange way, I needed them, as much as they needed me during the night. The wind howling around the hut again. The structure groaned beneath the Soyen. Gusts and snow hit the windows. Warren and Face woke up to intervals to watch Los Lobos, who, despite the uproar, slept in relative calm down. The largest wolf raised his head with his ears from time to time, alert as if he were looking for danger each time he relaxed after a moment, perhaps realizing that he was finally safe when he arrived. The morning gray light filtered through the icy windows. He rubbed his eyes to wake up and yawned. I'll try to contact my colleagues now, he said, pulling out a radio. Her team went out, braving the biting cold to find a biting. Warren brought a coffee pot to a boil, and the intense aroma filled the room. Cabin, the wolves moved, and slowly blinked the bandaged leg of the most. Little girl seemed to have improved slightly. Although she continued to show signs of swelling, Warren offered them fresh water, marveled in silence at how natural it was to take care of these wild creatures when Kara returned. His expression was a mixture of relief and urgency. They are sending help, he announced. 2 of my team members can meet us at a meeting point about 5 km's from here near a frozen stream. If we can get the wolves there, they'll transport them. The rest of the way, Warren nodded. Then we'd better do the pry. Suitcases. The snowmobile can carry 2 people and wolves if we have. Be careful. Her face nodded, and they began to gather the necessary supplies. They prepared a makeshift sled to hook behind the snowmobile, lined with blankets so that the wolf could be killed. Wounded could lie comfortably, the largest wolf. Although distrustful of the contraption, seemed to intuit that it was necessary, and sniffed it without protesting the puppy. The last obstacle was to convince the wolves to get on the sled. Warren decided to go first by opening the cottage door to a world of shining white. An icy wind came in. Bristling Los Lobos' fur face led the way, talking in a low voice. Using gentle gestures, the smaller wolf whimpered when he was put on the sled, but the bandage and the ointment must have offered him some relief, because the largest wolf did not fight too fiercely. She jumped on her own, healing herself, protective against her brother with Los Lobos. Warren got on the snowmobile, and Kara settled behind him, holding a radio in his hand. The engine roared, echoing in the extension. As they walked away from the cabin, Warren felt a twinge of mixed emotions a part of him. I was reluctant to leave this temporary refuge, where man and wolf had coexisted in such a way that they were not able to do so. But he knew that this journey was essential for the sake of the wolves, and perhaps for the sake of the wolves. His own snowmobile traced a path through the infinite white. The roar of his engine was the only sound in a world muffled by ice and snow. Warren was ahead, gripping firmly the handlebars as Kara sat behind him watching the sled. Tied behind them inside the sled, the two wolves were hoisting together. The bandaged paw of the smallest tucked close, the largest wolf huddled protectively and affectionately around his brother. His goal was to reach the frozen creek, a meeting point where the comrades would be facing each other. Waiting for the trip would cover approximately 5 kilometers of distance that. It seemed too short and dangerously long, although the sun offered a feint. The heat of the Alaskan winter was still a cable, and a strong breeze dragged specks of snow that itched in any exposed skin while traversing the rugged terrain. He frequently looked at his radio, checking for updates on his equipment. The signal crackled from time to time. When distorted by the thick forest and the mountains that rose menacingly, they said that they would meet with. In an hour we announced our faces, raising our voices above the wind. We have to keep a steady pace, Warren nodded, concentrating on guiding. The snowmobile between snowdrifts and hidden rocks from time to time looked at backwards to make sure the wolves didn't look too shaken by the rattle of the trip. The largest wolf moved at every turn but seemed to trust Warren, and Face did not intend to hurt them 10 minutes after starting the trip on. The sky began to change. A bank of steel-gray clouds accumulated on the horizon, hinting at a storm that was brewing in the sky. As Warren approached, he felt a twinge of worry. Traveling in a storm of buffon, especially with injured animals on their backs, was a risk I expected. Avoid, accelerate, he said, turning his head slightly so that Kara could hear him. She nodded, tapping him on the shoulder to signal that she was getting ready to. The blows the sledge beat against the icy ridges, sending small snow flurries on the wolves. They groaned, but none tried to jump such. Understanding that this was his best chance, the forest became thicker, and visibility deteriorated as the trees approached. Warren slowed down the snowmobile, zigzagging carefully between trunks and low snow-laden branches. A false movement could make them fall or damage the sled. We are near the creek, said Face, consulting a small handheld GPS. If we follow the tree line, we should see it soon, Al. A little while they came out into a wide clearing. The completely frozen stream shone under the weak sunlight. Its surface was full of blown snow, which made the Kimang. It made it look like a smooth, icy road. We should cross over here, he suggested. My team should be on the far shore. Warren drove the snowmobile on the ice, checking its stability. The ice crackled slightly but remained firm as they crossed. He couldn't help but marvel at the raw beauty of the pristine, silent, and vast landscape. Yet, with each passing minute, the dark clouds crept closer, casting an ominous shadow over the distant peaks. Halfway to across the creek, the radio turned on. Face. I'm Dan, said a muffled voice to us. We're approaching from the east, but the storm is approaching faster than expected. You may have to duck if it hits before we get there. Kara exchanged a worried look with Warren received. Dan replied, we are crossing the stream. We should now get to the other side soon. Where exactly you will be? Red mark on a pine tree, sizzling Dan's voice. There we will set up a shelter. Storm. As if it were a sign, the wind began to howl, blowing gusts of snow on ice. Visibility decreased even further, and Warren struggled to keep the Los Lobos snowmobile stable by feeling the change of atmosphere. They emitted moans of anxiety. The youngest moaned, shivering from cold or fear or from both. Kara put a reassuring hand on Warren's shoulder. A little further, encouraged. We'll find that Mark arrived on the other side of the creek, where the line of trees that stood as cover me. Silent sentinels, the wind whipping their faces with snow, making it difficult to share your vision. Warren narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing the logs for any sign of red. At last, through the white swirl, saw a faint touch. Colored in a tall pine tree, relief flooded him as he guided the snowmobile to him effectively under the pine tree. There was a half-raised shelter, 2 people in thick winter gear. They struggled to secure the tarpaulins against the relentless wind. A small fire crackled nearby, offering a beacon of heat. Face waved her hands, and the figures. They turned and raised their arms in greeting when the Fisi snowmobile came over. Warren turned off the engine. Face jumped, talking quickly with his colleagues above the roar of the wind. We have found them, he said, pointing with the thumb. The motorcycle are weak, but stable, the smallest. He has an injury to his leg. They give high, and with a beard between. Kano nodded with Manan. this ad dusto. "We are going to put them in shelter," said his companion, a woman. A short girl named Nina hurriedly spread thick blankets inside the makeshift camp. "That storm is about to hit us," Nina warned in a tense voice because of the urgency together. They carefully convinced the wolves to get out of the sled. The largest wolf growled low in his throat when Dan came closer, but the reassuring presence of the face helped to keep him calm. The smaller wolf, shivering with cold and stress, he allowed Nina to guide him to the worn blankets. He kept around protectively, ready to intervene if the animals were frightened by Los Lobos. Sheltered in the relative heat of the tarps and the fire, the team set out to stabilize the area for the storm that looming. Dan scrambled to nail more lines while Nina prepped supplies for our wolves. A proper first aid kit, bandages, sterile and sedative if needed. Warren now rather as a bystander. He felt a surge of mixed emotions. Relief that the wolves were finally in expert hands, but also a surprising twinge of loss for days had been under. His exclusive care, forging an extraordinary bond, could not ignore the hurla. Flash of sadness that maybe they didn't need it anymore once they were healed and back with their herd face. He sensed his uneasiness as he helped Nina check the smaller wolf's paw, looked at Warren. "We will be sure that they receive the best care," he promised in a low voice, "and once they are ready, we can talk about how to release them. Maybe you might even be there." Warren cracked a smile and nodded. "I would love to," murmured the Vey. The wind picked up, shaking the tarpaulins in a disturbing way, but inside this, a small camp by the creek felt a warmth that transcended fire, a warmth born of compassion, cooperation, and a new respect for these majestic creatures. And the wind became stronger, shaking the improvised shelter and decreases, forcing Nina to reinforce the ropes and tarpaulins. The sky had darkened in an eerie way, and the cratrin. The temperature had dropped even lower, indicating that the storm was about to arrive. Warren stood on the edge of the course's small enclosure, watching as the ice crystals swirled around it like a malevolent dance inside. The two wolves lay on thick blankets, their breath visible in the cold air, the wounded paw of the smaller wolf. She had been bandaged again with sterile dressings, and a mild sedative had been calming his tremors. The largest wolf remained alert, with his eyes casting darts between humans, ready to defend his brother if necessary. From time to time he emitted a low, anxious moan, while the gusts of wind, they whipped the tarpaulins. Kara knelt next to them, checking the ties. Around the limb of the smaller wolf he spoke in a low voice, almost lost in the howling of the wind. "We have to wait for the storm to pass before moving them," told the group. "To travel now would pose a risk of frostbite and injury to both them and us." Warren nodded, although a flash of worry crossed his face. Staying there meant depending on the massy, hastily built shelter with only a small fire and supplies. "How long do these storms usually last?" Adam asked, who was struggling with a corner of the canvas that was waving. "It could be hours. It could be all night," Dan replied in a tense voice. Alaska's weather is unpredictable at best, with no other choice than." They set out to make the shelter as safe as possible. Warren helped Nina to peel our snow around the perimeter to fake form a windbreak, while Dan and Kara placed a secondary tarp for greater isolation. The wolves watched everything with quiet fascination, strange bipeds running. To protect himself from the fury of nature between tasks, Warren does not. I could help but reflect on how surreal the situation was just a few days ago I had been living in. Solitude, chopping wood, and enduring the endless nights. Only now did I form part of a small, determined group fighting to save two wild wolves, whom Charlie had come to love in a surprisingly short time. His old and battered snowmobile remained parked near the middle of the concourse. Buried in new accumulations of snow, Warren gave her a worried look, aware that if the batter ration, storm worsening, recover any equipment or escape quickly could to be impossible. When he realized it, his chest was pressed with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Finally, when the storm peaked, the group huddled around a modest fire built in a shallow hole to prevent them from flying. The sparks and flames offered little warmth, but it was enough to prevent the limbs from becoming numb. They took turns feeding the llamas with small sticks and branches collected from under the evergreens nearby the wolves. They rested with their eyes half closed, lulled by the soft crackle of the fire and the soft murmur of voices. Human Face periodically checked the pulse and breathing of the wolf more, making sure that the sedative would not have caused any adverse effects. She's stable, Kara confirmed, breathing a sigh of relief. Body can fight any until he receives proper medical attention. Warren gently stroked the side of the largest wolf, a tentative gesture by Consuelo to her surprise. The wolf didn't flinch. He even leaned slightly towards his touch as if recognize kindness. You're a brave soul, Warren murmured more to himself. Just as they are not both at nightfall, the wind howled. With no intensity, the temperature continued to plummet, and the group, immersed in a battle for survival, sleeping was a luxury that no one could fully afford. You always had to watch the fire and make sure that the tarpaulins didn't rip or collapse under the gale. During one of his turns, Warren noticed that the larger wolf was circling restlessly around the smaller wolf. The effect of the sedative was evident. The wolf was breathing easy in a dream. Deep, yet the brother's concern was palpable. He gently pushed the sleeping wolf with its muzzle emitting soft moans as if to say, "I'm here. Don't worry." The sight stirred Warren's heart in the quiet. The communication of Los Lobos saw parallels with human devotion and compassion. These animals, too, often painted as ruthless predators, they displayed a love and loyalty that defied stereotypes, reminded him why he had welcomed them in the first place. They were more than creatures. Savages were beings capable of tenderness and pain like humans after the Pates. Midnight, the storm reached its peak. The snow fell in thick layers in Kara. The shelter trembled under the onslaught of Kara, and Nina worked frantically to Jevies, propping up the windward side by driving stakes deeper into the frozen ground. Dan gave instructions in a voice tall, with her voice almost lost in the tempest. Warren helped in what she could, although his numb fingers were shaken by the uproar. The largest showing his teeth every time a gust made the canvas flap. Too Close Face spoke softly to him, maintaining eye contact and using a calm, reassuring tone. He whispered slowly, reaching out his hand. "We just want to keep you safe." Finally, the storm seemed to die down. The wind calmed down to become a more manageable roar, and the Nevada lightened to a soft. Dan poked his head through the entrance to the shelter and explored the Stornces. "Horizon with a flashlight is waning," he announced, with relief in his voice. "We could move in the morning. If it continues to subside, little by little the group will." Allowed brief moments of rest, Warren settled down next to the wolves, leaning his back against a wooden pole. The largest wolf, still restless, finally lay down near. He resting his head on his paws. Warren felt a faint smile on his feet. Lips was extraordinary. How quickly trust could be built in such extreme circumstances. He looked at the wolf, smaller, who slept, marveling at his endurance despite the freezing cold. The wound and all that she had endured slept with an almost serene. Warren look, whispered a silent promise. "You'll be all right. We'll make sure of it tonight." It was moving forward, and when the gray light of dawn filtered through the clouds, the storm had passed a quieter silence. Deep that any other they had known in the last few days took hold of the arroyo. The snowdrifts were coming. At waist height, in places shining under the pale dawn, Kara woke up to check his radio while Nina stoked the remains of the fire. Warren sat down, stretching out their stiff limbs. The wolves moved, blinking in a daze. It was time to see if they could finish their journey, one that would lead to healing and healing. Finally, to the freedom of these majestic creatures of nature. The morning came with an eerie stillness, as if the earth itself were recovering from the fury of the Kiri. Storm. The sunlight reflected off the snow, creating a dazzling show of white and gold that contrasted sharply with the ordeal of the previous night. Warren felt some relief. The storm was over, and they could finally move on with Los Lobos. However, a unsettling anxiety did not cease to torment him. Some instinct warned him that his challenges had not ended the day. Face radio turned on, and she responded enthusiastically to give Nina to me. "You get the storm has subsided." "How are you pausing and listening, Warren?" He couldn't understand the exact words, but he saw that his shoulders were turning towards him. Kara said in a low voice, "Dan reports that although the weather has improved, we have a new problem. The road leading to the wildlife center is blocked. Fallen branches and ice are working to clear it, but it could. Maybe one day." Warren breathed the news, landed like a weight in his chest. "So we're stuck here for a while. The wolves can't. Traveling on foot safely with one injured and snowmobile will not take us center. If the main roads, they're blocked." Face nodded. "We'll have to crouch until they give in." Nina, "Finish clearing the route. We can't risk taking the wolves down an alternate path. There's too much snow." Deep and only stressed them more. Despite the setback, the small group. They stoked the fire, they checked the state of Los Lobos, and sayas. They discussed the best way to manage the weight the biggest wolf was walking, nervously sniffing the air outside the makeshift shelter from time to time, as if looking for something familiar on the Gazosten. Smaller wolf rested with squinted eyes, better after sedative. But still clearly sore face, asked Warren, at one point you think, who feel that their pack might be nearby or are just anxious about it. Considered your question, Sai Wolves have powerful instincts to track. Herd members may be able to sense a distant smell or familiar territory, but given the storm, any trace of smell could be lost, their restlessness and listlessness, and worry weighed on them as the hours went by. Warren, unaccustomed to such an activity, he offered to explore the surroundings in search of more firewood. Agree that it was a good idea as long as it remained within sight of the vault. Don't stray too far. He warned the snow is deep and we don't want to lose you if the weather changes again. Armed with warm clothes and a cyan. Sturdy shovel Warren ventured a little away from the creek landscape. Covered in fresh snow was both breathtaking and treacherous, every step of the way was. He sank up to his knees, which forced him to conserve energy even like this. He managed to gather enough fallen branches to keep the fire burning for another cold night, however, On his return journey, something caught his attention. A faint set of footprints that moved away from the bank of the creek were not big enough for a moose and not small enough for rabbits or foxes. His heart raced, suspecting that they could be wolf tracks, but they were his too. Curiosity prompted him to keep going. He followed the courtier. He tracked for a while and noticed that the steps seemed uneven, as if the wolf was. It was a Kawara wolf, could be another injured member of the same pack or such. The smaller wolf had wandered before he had captured it. Questions swirled, feeding his sense of urgency a sudden. A gust of snow from the surface stung his face and blurred his vision. He noticed that he had gone farther away than anticipated. The shelter was already out of sight. He looked back. Orienting himself by a crooked pine tree that had passed minutes before was better. Before it was lost, or the weather changed again, but at the same time. Turning around, he glimpsed a movement out of the corner of his eye, a flash of gray fur between the trayer and between the parater. His breath was cut off. Another wolf carefully left the wood on the war fire floor so as not to look threatening. Hello, he muttered, aware of the absurdity. That sounded like greeting a wild creature, yet it couldn't get rid of. From the feeling that this wolf might be related to the couple he was sheltering, the figure approached. Stealthily standing behind the trunk of a rhetor bird, Warren saw a snout, thin ears. Tall and irregular fur, definitely a wolf, but in poor condition, observed him with suspicion, as if he had not be sure whether to approach or flee. Warren stood, still adopting the biesngi, the same calm posture he had used with the wounded wolf in his hut, passed the minutes in a kind of. Finally, the wolf took a hesitant step forward. Warren was able to. It was now that he was well below his weight, his fur matted by the ice. His head was down, not in a way that was too bad. Not only submissive, but of exhaustion. A painful feeling of compassion echoed through her. Inside, how many wolves were out there fighting a losing battle against the relentless winter? He remembered that face. He had mentioned a herd was this other separate member. The idea appealed to him. If they could gather these wolves, maybe they would all have a better chance. Then suddenly the dra. Wolf growled a deep roar that startled Warren, bared his teeth. Although he seemed too weak to be a real threat, Warren raised his hands on the muevadas. Arms instinctively with Las Palmas out, showing that he had no weapon. Calm whispered with the mecha. Heart pounding, but the wolf's eyes flashed past him, noticing something behind him. Warren. He risked looking over his shoulder, seeing only snow-covered branches and the footprints he had left. The wolf's growl intensified, and then shot away and disappeared among the pines with a surprising agility for his emaciated body. A soul. A swirl of confusion and unease gripped Warren why he had fled, and Gol, who had frightened him by grabbing his bundle of firewood, returned to the refuge with all the meeting repeating itself in her mind. When she returned, Kara noticed the worried look on her face. All right, he asked as he deposited the wood near the fire. Warren explained what he had seen. Face listened attentively with a thoughtful expression. Another wounded or hungry lone wolf could be. Part of the same pack, or could be a solitaire. In any case, is risky to follow him without reinforcements. He nodded, but he couldn't simply. Walking away, I seem so desperate, I know, Kara said quietly, placing a hand reassuring on Warren's shoulder. But first we have to think about those who are here once the Feetrophus. Stabilize ourselves or them in danger, Warren looked at the Los Lobos, who rested under the tarpaulins with emotions stirring in their chests. Nature was merciless, and he could not save all creatures on its own. However, the idea that a wolf, wandering around half dead and separated from his family, stirred up in him a fervent determination. The hours passed slowly under the improvised shelter. The freshly fallen snow covered the landscape. Like a silencer over any distant sound, Ren and Face took turns to take care of Los Lobos and stoke the fire while Dan and Nina tried to open up. On the way to the main road, each radio update revealed a partial success. The fallen branches and the piles of snow continued to impede his. Yet, Warren's thoughts kept coming back to the third wolf, who had glimpsed in the forest the skeletal figure, the fearful brightness and fear. Something of that encounter tormented him. He couldn't get rid of the cumin, feeling that the lonely animal might be related to the couple who had possibly rescued another separated family member. Meanwhile, the two wolves under the shelter showed signs of improvement. The youngest, although still in pain, he could now, changing his position on the blankets without moaning. His brother maintained a vigilant posture, lying from time to time, when the paw bandaged as if trying to offer Consuelo Face provided him with careful doses of heal painkillers, explaining that although they helped him, they also made him feel dazed and unbalanced. I wish we could get them to our center sooner, he muttered, Face looking at the terrain. Storm devastated AR, need adequate enclosure, regular power, and a stress-free environment. Warren understood his occupation have traveled a long way, he said softly. But I'm also worried about that other wolf that there's out there. Kara gave him a thoughtful look. It could be from the same herd. Or else we cannot risk losing the progress we have made here by going to a rescue mission for which we are not prepared. Warren nodded, but the image of the lone wolf persisted. Late afternoon, Dan's voice crackled over the radio. We got an opening, partial on the road. If we push hard, we could clear enough. As for a vehicle to pass tomorrow morning, you think you can hold on until then? Kara replied. Affirmatively, we are fine here, Dan. The wolves are stable, just hurry up. If you can. She looked at Warren and nodded. Reassuringly, relief came over him. One more night, and finally they could move Los Lobos to one more ground. Surely he turned to the animals and stroked the thick fur of the largest wolf. Hold on, he murmured. Help is coming. However, that sense of relief was short-lived. Close to dusk, when the sky it took on a purple hue, the largest wolf bristled. The hair on his neck stood up suddenly with his ears turned and his eyes fixed on the tree line. The smaller wolf moved, letting out a groan of questioning. What has scared them now? Asked Nina. Ten's Face picked up his binoculars and looked through the dim light, peering into the Prisol. Edge of the forest, there's movement out there, he said. I don't know if it's a person or a kama animal. A cold knot formed in Warren's stomach. Could be that wolf. The largest wolf let out a high-pitched bark, then got off the deck, the blankets limping slightly as he moved toward the exit of the vault. Warren stood up, blocking his. On the easy road, he said with his arms up, we can't let you go now. The wolf growled softly, not aggressively, but anxiously, and looked at his little brother and then Warren, as if torn between duty and caution, a twinge of empathy. Mun Yili hit the twin deed. Both probably smelled a familiar smell, possibly that of a glory Fatoran. Member of the pack. The radio in front of everyone creaked again with a start. Face urgent update was heard. The voice of Dan. We've seen another wolf near the Pita. Possibly smell. Road seems weak. Could be trying to go to you, the heart of you. Warren jumped. It's gotta be him, he snapped, turning the third one in the face. Wolf comes in this direction. Kara frowned, exchanging a cough-lee look with Nina. We can't let him get close, hurt and alone without at least trial. Try to help him, he said, but we cannot abandon these two. Abandon these two. The plan. Frustration welled up in Warren's chest, and I offered, surprising even to himself. Stay here with them. That wolf could be part of their pack. Nina. He seemed skeptical. You're just one person, and if he's too scared or too scared. I won't do anything reckless, Warren insisted, but I can't leave it out there to freeze. I'll take Charlie, my snowmobile, to see if I can. Intercepted it. Face hesitated, scrutinizing the group's expressions. It's okay, he agreed. Finally, with a voice tinged with concern, "But keep the radio on. If you have problems, call us. We'll do what we can." Warren quickly packed his bags and put on several. Layers of warm clothes and a small first aid kit was secured. "Checked your snowmobile's fuel enough for a short trip. As long as it didn't get too far away, I'll take a look for a while if not. I find it, or if things get dangerous, I'll go straight back to the quaise." 2 wolves saw him leave the smaller one, emitted a low whimper as if. Sensed he stopped to give him one last pat. "I'll be back," he promised. As he climbed into his snowmobile and revved up the engine, the largest wolf let out a howl, a desolate note, and Tangen there, resounding that echoed against the snow. Warren shuddered at its haunting. "Beauty indoors," he murmured, moving away from the refuge. The twilight became more intense as he traversed the snowy terrain, guided by tracks and half-forgotten landmarks, the report of Gelidi. Dan suggested that the lone wolf was near the partially cleared road. So Warren headed towards that conscious route of the snowdrifts and the hidden ice. Every roar of the engine was discordant. In the middle of the otherwise silent wilderness, he finally saw movement. Near a group of fir trees, he turned off the engine, got out and grabbed his flashlight. He advanced cautiously. His heart pounding. The silhouette of a wolf emerged, limping delgado, with his ribcage alarmingly visible. He let out a slight growl as Warren approached a few yards away. "I'm not here to bore or hurt you," said Warren. Lowering his voice, he recognized the same hollow eyes in the Pigassima. The same trembling body that he had seen in the first 2 wolves looked even more desperate. "Like you've reached the limit of survival. Your family is close." "Let me help you." The wolf staggered and slumped on his hind legs a sable. A wave of pity swept through Warren as he approached behind a fir tree trunk. Another figure emerged, Dan with the Trondromab rifle slung over his shoulder, carefully warned, "We don't want him to shoot off." Warren nodded, relieved by the support, knelt in the snow, offering his hand. In that gesture of peace, the wolf would perceive his sincerity, or Beth. Attack in fear, the wolf raised his head, with his eyes reflecting the glow of Warren's lantern. For an instant, man and beast shared a silent communion. Momentarily forgetting the swirling snow, Warren knelt in the snow, with his heart beating with the third wolf, forces in his ears, a tattered specter of nature. He lay exhausted before him, his breath short. Dan was a few steps behind, with the rifle hanging. But that's it. The air crackled with tension, as if the whole forest. I held my breath, waiting to see if this desperate creature would accept or reject the help that was being given to me. "Offered him calmly," Warren murmured slowly, approaching his hand. Extended, trembled, slightly testimony of what was at stake emotionally. He was not an expert on life. Sylvestre as a face, but empathy and instinct guided him, a whirlpool of tour. The wind caught the edges of his coat, carrying its scent to the wolf in the pits. The animal's nasal snares opened, and he gave a low, obsessive moan for a moment. Warren caught a glimpse of a glint in the wolf's tired eyes, perhaps an acknowledgement or a vague memory of Senni. Security then collapsed, too weak to resist or flee, gathering his. Warren carefully placed a blanket he had brought over the creature, speaking in soft murmurs. "You're all right," said, wishing that his words could really penetrate the fear of the wolf. "We'll take you with your family." Dan slowly walked over the trees, looking for any sign of danger. "We should bring it back to the face," whispered. "If we're lucky, this wolf could be the missing piece of the puzzle." Warren nodded, raised softly the wolf's head, amazed at how light it seemed. Despite its size, the poor animal must have been carrying. "Weak, starving, let's move. Music front, you hold the hindquarters." Between the 2 of them, they moved the lame wolf to a sled that they had brought, similar to the Picalin's improvised contraption that Warren had used for the other 2. The wolf whimpered softly, but his exhaustion, it seemed to overshadow any remaining struggles once secured. Dan took the razatwad, towing the sled behind his own snowmobile while Gatias. Warren followed him in Charlie's old and battered machine on the journey back to the Fash. Temporary shelter was tense and bittersweet. On the one hand, the heart of Hess. Warren quickened at the prospect of reuniting this lone wolf with the injured couple of another. He worried about how they would react. The wolves had complex social hierarchies and had no guarantee that the newcomer would be welcome. However, he clung to the Sais. Esperanza, remembering the devotion she had witnessed between the 2 wolves in her cabin when they arrived, was. By nightfall, the sky was painted with stripes of the color of the band and orange, an uncommon beauty that offered a momentary respite from the biting cold. Her face rushed out to meet her, with his eyes wide open with concern. "You have found him?" he asked incredulously in Lavois. Warren, disassembled, nodding, is in bad shape. "But I live together," guided the femelle. Sled to the shelter. The two wolves inside moved immediately. The larger one raised his hands, ears, and let out a high-pitched bark that echoed from the inside of the canvas. The wolf, still smaller, recovering, he raised his head. Confused face was placed between the newcomer and the couple, just in case a tense silence fell on the couple group, while Warren and Kara carefully unrolled the blanket that returned to the blanket. Third wolf at the beginning. The wounded wolves looked restless, barking in chabble. Then the newcomer raised his head, looking into the eyes of the wolf. Larger wolf with an almost electric intensity followed a soft pleading, whimpering in the posture of the lar. Guest wolf shifted from cautious aggression to sudden recognition, shortened the distance by sniffing the newcomer. With his ears flattened as a sign of empathy, the smaller wolf let escape a low moan rising halfway on the bound legs of the three wolves. They seemed engaged in a silent conversation, communicating with their bodies in a way that words could never face. Exhaled, the relief was noticeable. In their posture, they know each other. Look how they greet each other, without grunts, without bristling their hair. This is definitely part of his family unit. Warren felt that tears. It stung in the eyes to witness such a raw and intimate moment among wild creatures. Was moving it was. He realized that he was backing away, giving space to the wolves to reassert their bonds. The third wolf, despite his weakness, managed to caress the wounded brother's snout, a slow and tender gesture. That said it all. The biggest wolf stayed protecting him, making sure that every move out of the Pacific. Soon, the three wolves huddled together in the blankets. A small herd gathered together. Their soft moans and licks seemed to reassuring each other. "We're here, we've survived," for Warren and the Faki. Moreover, it was a moment of collective amazement that eclipsed the difficulties of the previous days. "You achieved," whispered Warren's face, with his eyes fixed on the sleigh. "If you hadn't come out, that wolf might have perished alone in the snow." He shrugged, overwhelmed with emotion. "Actually, all of them." "We did. I just had to try." His reverie was interrupted by the crackle of the radio and the face of Dan's voice, urgent. "The road is finally clear for a truck. We are on our way to your location, 20 minutes at most." All went into action. The wolves needed safe transport, and, with the family now complete, the mission took on an even deeper meaning. Nina prepared sedatives in case the wolves. They panicked during the trip. Warren offered to help carry them, even though his heart was shrinking at the mission. Think about letting them go when they give. And Nina arrived with a sturdy vehicle on. The group carefully moved the three wolves to large padded cages. The newcomer put up more resistance, but with gentle persuasions and mild sedation, the assembled herd calmed down. He maintained eye contact through the mesh of the cage, with stares filled with what Warren could only interpret as trust and resignation, knowing somehow that this was part of their road to recovery. Under the glare of the headlights, Warren was left with a face watching as Dan secured the cages. The snow glistened under his haliched tree, feet silent witness of a moment that felt at once victorious and bittersweet. "You can visit them in the center," said Kara. "They will need time to cages, heal and adapt, but once we are sure they can handle it, we will release them back into the cages." "Nature." Warren nodded his head, swallowing. "I would like to say, with a broken voice, I need to see them free where they belong." Kara smiled. "And I'm sure they'll be happy to see you too." Engine roared as it started, and the headlights cut through the gloom as the vehicle. Warren felt a tear slide down his cheek. Tears of relief, gratitude, and unexpected grief at his departure. Reminded himself that this was the correct result. A family reunited with a second opportunity to survive. In the silence that followed, whispered a last goodbye to loss. Wolves imagining their breath steaming in the cold, their hearts beating at the cold, in unison with nature. Then turning to face, he sketched a salmon. Trembling smile. "Thank you for everything." Face squeezed her arm. "No thanks for a mastem. Give them a chance, and remind us all why we do this every day." The next ones felt strangely calm for Warren to leave behind. The soft moans and cautious footsteps that had filled his cabin replaced by the familiar silence of Ka, the wilderness of Alaska. Yet this silence was no longer felt. Solitary instead of wolves and uncertainty, there was now a deep sense of peace and purpose for the fell. Afternoons, Warren was looking at the horizon, remembering every moment he had shared with the three wolves. He remembered the trembling despair of the first meeting, the trust gained with effort, and the final reunion that had brought them all together in a way that never anticipated thinking about them now. Safe in the wildlife center of Face comforted him. He trusted that. With proper care and healing, they would soon return to the snowy forest they called home, true to their word. Kara stayed in touch, sent updates, photos of the wolves. Recovering in a spacious enclosure where they rested in the sun and played in the sun and played in the sun. Snow, the smaller wolf's paw, was healing and the bandages were going away, gradually removing the third wolf that had previously been emaciated and fearful. He regained. Gradually, the most important thing was that the wolves prospered as a U4, close-knit pack with a stronger family bond than ever worn often. Imagined the day of his eventual liberation in nature, imagined himself standing on the edge of the tree line, watching them move forward free, healthy, and together perhaps they would take a look back, just for a second, in recognition of the man who offered them warmth and compassion when they needed it most. Meanwhile, Warner returned to his routines, chopping wood, taking care of his little one, and fortify his hut against the relentless cold, but he did so with the Kava. Renewed admiration for the land in which he lived, where before he only saw the harshness of nature, he now recognized a deeper harmony, a delicate balance between survival and empathy. Kept extra folded blankets near the fireplace just in case, he said to himself with a wry smile. If this story of unexpected compassion and a reunited wolf has reached your heart's content, let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed of a bond between a human being and a wild creature that has defied your crazy assumptions? Share your experiences below. We'd love to hear them. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and Draka. Watch for more stories celebrating the unbreakable bonds that connect us all from the woods. Kindness can bring about miracles where we least expect them.